This happened to a student in high school when he was in sophomore year. I'm going to keep his name anonymous, but this is from his point of view. Since he was in sophomore year, he had been hearing rumors and people talking about the deep web. Keep in mind that this was in 2015, and he had no idea about what the deep web was or what's on there and etc. People such as his friends were telling him stuff like what to do on the deep web, what not to do, and etc. He seemed to think that maybe they were all just playing tricks on him, trying to say stuff to try to scare him. He ended up going home, which he was home alone, due to the fact that his parents were basically out. They were out doing stuff, so it wasn't really the big of a deal. Since they were out doing stuff, he was home alone. He had been used to being home alone for a long time, so he ended up calling his friends and asking them about the deep web just to get more information, such as how to get on there. For starters, you can't use your normal internet browser, such as Google and Firefox. You would need to download the Tor browser to get on there and download some VPNs to protect your IP. He did that, and he ended up following what his friends said, and he listened to instructions from his friends such as don't say certain things on the deep web and what sites to avoid, such as legal guns, illegal porn, and etc. He went on the deep web, and just as expected, he ended up doing all the things that his friends told him to do. Once he was on the deep web, he was searching for some forums, but most of them were not interesting to him. He was scrolling and clicking off certain sites that didn't really seem to be interesting at all. So, at this case, he was just basically going through. Eventually, he came across a forum that had something such as, "What is it?" Now, What Is It was kind of like a weird site. So he went on it, and it turns out to be a woman. She was sitting in what seemed to be a dark room, and she was got a plate, what seemed to be some drugs. Illegal drugs, in fact. So much so that she started eating them, and she ended up laughing like a hyena. She honestly couldn't laugh or stop laughing. But at the same time, the fact she couldn't laugh at certain parts, it kind of confused him. All of a sudden, she takes a gun and takes her own life. Now, obviously, he ended up saying that they were sick and that the site would be shut down. As soon as he said that, he ended up installing the Tor browser, and he ended up closing up his computer for the night. He didn't even want to tell his parents about what happened on the deep web, fearing that he would get into major trouble. So with that being the case, and with that being said, he ended up just going on with his normal day. However, though, a few nights later, he was on his phone texting his girlfriend when he got a message from an unknown number that said, "I am going to kill you." Obviously, he thought that maybe this person probably had the wrong phone number. But what startled him the most was the fact that this person has somehow leaked all of his information, such as his family members, the school he went to, places he went, etc. He honestly felt his color drained, so he ended up swearing to God to never go on the deep web. But, however, though, he heard his window shattered in his bedroom to see that same woman, well, or what seemed to be similar to her. How would she be alive if she was killed? Well, it turned out it was someone who dressed up like her, and he ended up going over towards him. He almost killed him, if the cops had not arrived any sooner. He was eventually arrested, and the site of What Is It? Yeah, it got shut down. Now, it was something that he couldn't remember, but he had never went on the deep web again. and he still gets nightmares whenever he thinks about this. This happened to one of my friends back in 2014, and his name was Danny. Danny was in junior year of high school, or at least grade 11. Danny had been on the deep web many times. Mainly, he had a lot of VPNs to cover his IP. He had been going on the deep web ever since sophomore year of high school, and he had been experienced with it for a while until this incident happened. Most of the time he would go on the deep web is to purchase some stuff for his friends. Not really illegal stuff, but certain drugs that you can't find anywhere. He made it his little business, and he was never caught, surprisingly. I have no idea how he got away with this without his parents knowing or anything, but it was definitely something that he had been doing with his friend for a while. Now, on the deep web, he decided instead of buying drugs this time, he decided to go and see if there was other stuff he could look at. There was such as government files, hitmen, illegal surfaces, X-rated sites, and etc. He seemed to be not really having interest in them until he was linked by some weird person to a video. He ended up clicking on the link, which brought him to what seemed to be a live stream. It seemed to be that there was this woman who happened to be crying. The woman was crying and he couldn't understand what was going on until all of a sudden there was a group of men who ended up violating her in many ways. I won't say exactly what they did, but they went as far as torturing her in many ways before killing her. Eventually, once she was killed, he ended up trying to click out, but the mouse froze. Even when he tried to put the power button on, it wouldn't work. Danny only ended up doing the only thing he could do, was he unplugged the computer, which shuts the whole thing off. He had scrapped that computer and didn't get a minute of sleep that night. However, though, at least a week later, he got a mysterious email, and surprisingly, it was an email he had not recognized before. But curious as he was, Danny opened up the file, and it contained pictures. It was pictures what seemed to be a house, and it took him to realize that it was his house. There were pictures of his house, even with his family members in there. Most of the pictures that he saw containing Danny. One of the pictures were very disturbing that Danny almost threw up. Was a picture of him sleeping in his own bedroom. Eventually, when he told his parents about this, they had grounded him from the internet for about 2 months due to what happened. Feeling that they weren't safe in the area, they moved out of that area at least 2 months later, as they were feared of being watched, even with the security cameras. Danny has no idea who that person was that took photos of him in his house or how they found his address. That will remain a mystery, and he will never return to the deep web again. This took place sometime in 2018. One of my friends, who happened to be in his 30s, his name was Andrew. Andrew had been told many stories and rumors about the deep web, saying that it has messed up content such as illegal drugs, hitmen for hire, illegal weapons, government files, and etc. Andrew had been interested in the deep web subject, but never had the opportunity to go on it till 2018. It was sometime in April when his wife was going on vacation for at least a few weeks with his quote-unquote with her friends, mainly her girlfriends. Since Andy had a business trip and a few weeks from there and he didn't want to go, he ended up staying by himself. Of course, he's got at least 2 kids, a 5-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old boy. They were home with Andy, so Andy had to look after them. One of the nights, however, though, when the kids were asleep, Andy was on his laptop looking on the deep web as he was curious as to what was on there. He eventually came across a site which had images. They were about young women between the ages of 13 and to around their 30s. He could see that there were women who were brutally tortured and torn to pieces by whatever. Honestly, Andy had wished he had stayed off the deep web because he ended up seeing, a lot of messed up stuff. He wished that he had stayed off of it, and he did all he could to try to protect his IP. But however, this person somehow grabbed his IP and stated, his full name, address, where he was from, etc. This honestly scared Andy. He didn't tell anybody about the deep web, he didn't even tell his wife about it, fearing that his wife would probably freak out, as she's the type of person that would always freak out over something that has happened, even messed up things. Nothing has happened to him since, but take his a word of advice and stay off the deep web, as you never know what could really happen on the deep web. This story is told in perspective of a female. She was one of the college students from 2016, and to keep it as private as possible with her name, she will just be anonymous for obvious reasons. She was around 24 years old, and since she was in college, she was going to be looking into working in the computer industry. She'd been into electronic stuff and has been wanting to work on electrical stuff involving computers, phones, and etc. She had been doing this for about a few years now, and one of these times she did a mistake that she honestly regret doing. She honestly was on the deep web. The deep web is usually about out, certain things that you can find that you wouldn't be able to find, such as online stuff that is very much illegal to the public, such as illegal hitmen, government files, and etc. Even stuff that will be getting you arrested if this was being made to the public. This honestly was something that actually happened to her. She honestly was looking on the deep web to find stuff, and she actually found something what appears to be a mystery box. A lot of people have done it as well on YouTube, so she thought she would go ahead and do one. She didn't have a YouTube channel, but she decided to go ahead and get a mystery box and test it out. Once she got what appears to be the mystery box, she ends up opening up the box, and that was at least a little while after she had ordered it. Probably about 4 weeks later, to be exact. It apparently she had put her information there, and once she does, she ended up looking over. She up ended up opening the mystery box, which contained a really disturbing stuff. It appears to be that when she opened it, she can see that there was a book. There was just basically a journal book of many things. It turns out that it was dates of people who had died. They were just random people in her area, and it turns out it was her friends. One of the stuff that she looked, it considered her friends and heart. The other consists of her friends and wallet, address, and etc. She honestly got so freaked out over what happened that she ended up not going on the deep web ever again. She still has no idea if these people were still out there or if this was some crazy prank. But she's never used a deep web since, and she doesn't see herself going back there.